Awesome.
Hey, Tom.
Well, we got a lot to cover today, so I think we're going to dispense early with the formalities. Clay, you can fade out the music. Hey, Tom, we got 60 folks in here already. I'm sure we'll get more as we go.
Yeah.
Blaine, welcome. Good
Yeah.
to see you, man.
How are
Good
you?
to see you guys. Appreciate you having me.
We're
Thank you
we're
for
so
coming.
excited to see what you're gonna brew for us.
Yeah, man. A little bit of history here.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be great, and I think a lot of folks will appreciate this. And just very quickly, again, big thank you to everyone who's here tonight for our last. Hard to believe it, David. Our last show of 2025.
I know,
Boy, what a
right?
season!
It's been a great season, and of course, our theme this season has been basically a tribute to Bob Popovics, and all the great tires and people who've been on the show this year have really stepped up and given us some great stories and insights into Bob and Blane. We kind of saved you for last on this because the Game Changer Fly really and the Gummy really kind of embodies a lot of that innovation that Bob was so into.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Bob was a great friend, great mentor. We always bounced ideas off each other. And that's part of some of the stuff. That's why I chose these two flies tonight, because he was a huge part of all of it. I don't want to get ahead of it, but if you guys want to ask me questions, I could, first fly I'm going to tie tonight is the Gummy Minnow. And Bob has a lot to do with it getting out to the market and to the world. And I can tell that story if you want me to, but I'll let you guys talk first.
Let's go back in time. Do you remember your first meeting with Bob?
Yeah, very first meeting, probably at one of the fly fishing shows, one of the Ferimsky shows. It's probably the International Fly Tying Symposium. That was probably the first time I ever met him. And he was gracious like he always has been. That's what made him so great. Bob he's just one of the guys, and he was always in it for the right reasons. And that's always what he and Lefty and, all the greats always taught, share your knowledge, so very, very thankful to fall into meeting all these great people. And Bob was the best.
Yeah.
So Blaine, speaking of history and sort of how this all came about and your story, and you and I have spent some time. I was so struck by your kind of approach to thinking about flies and all of that. And I remember first encountering your gummy minnow down in Harker's Island fishing for albies, probably like 20 years ago or something like that. And I was like, what is this? Is this even a fly? And I had no idea that it was you. Talk a little bit about sort of your background and how you got into this kind of fly tying and fly innovation sort of racket in the first place.
Well, when I was 15 years old, my mom took me to this tailwater in Virginia, about an hour from my house, called the Jackson River, where I met Harrison Steves and Steve Heiner. Steve Heiner was an aquatic entomologist, and they were fishing above me. And I've told this story many times, but I wasn't doing very well because it was my first time on a big piece of water. Only thing I'd ever fished were brook trout streams. So Heiner was up above me, closest to me, and Harry was above him. And I wasn't doing very well, and they were catching fish pretty consistently. So I walked up to Heiner and asked him what he was using. And instead of giving me the answer, he walked me up to his Jeep, and he gave me some vials and some alcohol to put the bugs in. And he gave me a book called McCafferty's Guide to Aquatic Insects. And it's a college text. And I wasn't real happy with that at the moment because everybody wants instant gratification, right? So, he said all the answers are in the stream, so go check them out. And so I went down the stream, collected, and it was very obvious what the main insect in that body of water was, and it happened to be a black fly larva. And at that time, he asked me if I tied flies. I said yes. And he said, just take what you see and try to emulate it. So I went home. I read what black fly larva did, in the water and when they hatched. And that time of year, it was kind of wintertime. So that was the time of year when they hatched, and it was right below the dam. And there was one main thing about black fly larvae is there's two things. One, when they get disturbed on the water, if you wade across, they'll release themselves on a silken thread and hang in the current and find a new home. That's one important thing that I learned. And the other thing was that they'll pupate on the rocks, and the pupal shuck looks very similar to a squid. So it has a squid carapace, and it has these little tentacles that stick out. And they seal that off, and they pupate. They'll change to an adult inside that, and it's, I guess, an air pocket's created inside, and I guess they chew their way out of it. But then once they make that hole, they get pushed out and they rise to the surface in an air bubble, and then they just fly off. So, just having a creative mind and artistic background at 15, I was drawing and painting probably since I was 9. And so my creative side kind of kicked in, and I, at that particular time, not giving my age away, there was a lot of the girls in school were getting all these little beads and putting them on pins and putting them on their shirts or putting them on their shoes or putting them in their hair. And they just had a million different colors of them. So I got my mom to take me up to a craft store, and there was just bazillion beads. So I got clear beads, pearl beads, clear beads with silver in the middle, you name it. I got a bunch of different styles. I went back home, and these were micro beads, the same kind of glass beads that we use now.
Yeah.
Right.
And this was back probably in like 89, something like that. So this was before the bead craze happened. And so I tied up a bunch of what I thought would be a cool fly, which I took a size 20 hook and put the bead in the middle, put black thread in front and back, and that was it. And then the larvae it's pretty obvious what the larvae look like. They look like a bowling pin, basically. And they would be in olive colors, browns, tans, grays. So I tied a bunch of those, and the next weekend my mom took me up there. And I went up there, and I did really well. And Harry and Heiner were up there again. And they walked up to me, and it's like, obviously you figured something out, so what are you doing? So I said, let me see your box. So I opened up my box, and they both started laughing. And I was like, I was kind of insulted at first because I thought they were making fun of my flies, but they's like, no, it's not that. Or like, so they opened their fly boxes, and it was almost identical to what they were using.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I don't know that put me on a path very early on in my career to really understand how important matching the hatches and understanding what fish are feeding on, and in creating something on your own, right? So that was something that really kind of was an aha moment. I've had several of those in my career, but that was the first real aha moment for me. Wow. And without, and Heiner and Harry are both good friends still. I don't see him as much as I used to, but Harrison Steves is a phenomenal fly tyer and innovator in his own right. He wrote that book, Terrestrials, with Ed Koch.
Oh, yeah.
And he's had a number of great fly patterns in Umpqua and Rainey's and a couple other companies. And so anyway, Harry kind of took me under his wing and started getting me to go to fly tying shows with him. And that's where I met Popovics. And, I was guiding at the time. I was kind of, moving forward a little bit, graduated high school and was kind of floundering. I had an art. I could have went to JMU with an art scholarship, but I didn't want to do it because I didn't love art in that way, and I like to use art with creating flies, something I could get instant gratification off of, right? So, so I didn't want to waste my parents' money, so I went to a community college locally and just trying to figure out a way. I was guiding part-time. I was trying to figure out a way to kind of get a career in fly fishing. And Harry helped me with that and introduced me to everybody. And, I was guiding for trout in the spring and fall, and I was doing smallmouth bass in the summer months. And it was really, this is another aha moment when you get a client that's fly fishing, and then they bring someone else that's wanting to throw conventional tackle. And that's always been very important to me since that moment, that I always want to know what's really going on in conventional tackle so I can maybe try to mimic that in a fly design.
Mm-hmm.
And what was going on is obviously these soft plastics were very popular in the early 90s and stuff like that. Like Cincos were one of the first soft plastics, and
Yeah.
they kind of evolved in the fluke style stuff. And um, if somebody brought a friend, I didn't have to worry about them. So I'd give them a fluke or give them some other soft plastic, and they were catching fish constantly throughout the day, and I only had to worry really about the fly angler. And that kind of triggered something in my mind where I wanted to start designing something that would mimic that at a very early time in my fly guiding career and tying career. And Harry and I going to these shows. One year we were there and we saw the crease fly for the first time. And
Yeah.
Harry had a science background, and he came back, and in the beginning he was spraying it down and doing all that stuff, and it was time consuming. And so Harry, having that science background, he decided that he could figure out a better way of doing that. So that's kind of where Loco Foam came from. And we never wanted to take his idea, but Harry had a little better idea, and we just kind of moved forward with that. And so knowing, not giving the secret sauce away, but knowing what we could create with these sparkly materials and all that, my idea was trying to figure out some kind of silicone or some kind of other material that wouldn't be molded, but where I could make something all together. And that's where the gummy came from. And
What year? When was that, Blane?
that was like probably around 98 when that
Yeah.
happened. So, I used to go to Harker's Island. You were talking about that earlier about, Cape Lookout and the Albies and
Yep.
the Outer Banks. And, I was doing that for a very long time, going down there with Brian Horsley and fishing with him. And, Tom Earnhardt and Jones Brothers Marine would always put on a party I think it was the second weekend in November back then.
Yep.
Might have been the first weekend in November, but the who's who of fly fishing would go to that. And at that time, I was hosting trips down there, so I'd always go down that weekend and then host the trip Monday through the following weekend with 6 or 8 clients or whatever I had. And during that time, I met some people that helped me create what is now Silly Skin, and I still manufactured here, and so I had that fly designed in my mind before I even had the material to do it.
Wow.
So as soon as I had the material, it literally took me 2 minutes to make the fly.
Mm-hmm.
This fly does not take very long at all. And it, I wasn't sure if people a lot of people don't consider it a fly, which we can kind of get into that in a minute. But the cool thing is I tied a couple hundred of them because it was super easy. It was the end of my smallmouth season. I was in the shop a lot, so it gave me a lot of time to tie. So I made a bunch of them, went down to Harker's, got there right at Tom's party and right when it started. And I walked in, it was always in the backyard, right on the sound. It's right at sunset. And I had a mission to go see Bob Popovics because I knew if anybody would think it was a fly or not, Bob would be the guy, obviously, with his silicone flies and his epoxy flies, and always kind of moving the sport forward. And, back then things were not very well accepted. Right. So, I knew if somebody was going to tell me if it was a fly or not, that he'd be the guy. So I walked up to him. I mean, I'd met him a couple of times, but I'm not sure he really knew who I was at the moment. And I showed him the flies, talked to him about it. He loved them. He asked me how I made them. I explained that to him. And he goes, well, I think these are flies. He goes, I think they're more of a fly than a popper is because they're not molded. You're actually doing this stuff and you're crafting it and all that. So he goes, give me 5 minutes and I'll be right back. So he took off, and there's probably a couple hundred people there. And the sun's setting, and I'll never forget this. He comes back. He goes, I want you to meet somebody. So I'm following Bob, and he's got shoulders like this, right? And so I'm following him through this crowd, and it's like the Red Sea's parting, right? And in the center, and I remember the spotlight came on, and right in the center of the party, that's where we're headed. And the sea's parting, and we get to the middle, and it's like an arena. And in the middle of everybody is Lefty holding court. And I'm like, oh shit, right? So I guess Lefty, this is the guy, this is the flies I was just showing you. This is him. And I'd met Lefty a couple times, but he meets thousands of people, right? So he goes, well, tell me all about it. So I did. I told him all about it, and he's like, well, this is amazing. He goes, how do they work? And I'm like, to be honest, I've never fished one, never had it in the water. He goes, other than testing in a tub and making sure that the materials didn't come apart. He goes, well, just like Lefty would say, it's like this is going to be like rolling a wine bottle in a jail cell. It's like this is going to work. This is going to be great. And he goes, unfortunately, I would love to have some, but unfortunately, I'm not going to stay. I got to fly out tomorrow. He goes, can I have some? I'm like, you can have all you want. And good buddy of mine who you had recently, Henry Cowan, was there. All the who's were there. It was a pretty amazing event back then. I mean, it really was. And I went out the next day. Before we could even get out there, you could hear the chatter on the radio with Brian and Sarah and all the other guides, and they were kind of having a rough day, but Brian and Sarah were doing pretty good. And the guys were just like, what are you guys using over there? And we're running out at the time. And I'd never forget it. Brian gets on there with his dry demeanor, and he goes, we're using Blane's new condom fly. So I'm like, perfect. Now, here we go. You expected that, right? So, well, I was super proud. I didn't catch the first fish on my fly, but Brian and Sarah did. And, it got coined early on as being a condom fly. So, you can hang a hat on that one.
Well,
Good thing you rebranded it.
Oh, yeah.
While you're at it, you want to tie one?
Yeah. Super, super simple.
Yeah.
So,
awesome. So David and I we're gonna drop off the camera so people can see you better here.
All right.
Keep going. We're here.
Yeah. I might need some glasses. I'm getting older.
What size hook is that?
This is the number 2. And what I'm going to be using is the silly skin I've been using for, it's been since '98. So that tells you how old this is and how old I'm getting. But
in the thread you're using?
This is just standard 6/0 thread.
Okay.
Yep. So I'm going to cut about a 1/16 inch of the silver off this, and that's a red liner with a silver silly skin.
Mm-hmm.
And so going back to my story, I ended up catching quite a few fish that day, and that was on a Sunday morning. And then Monday, I met my clients and went out with some other guides and whatnot, and we had a good day on the water. And I got a call. When I got to my room, I had a message from the front desk to call home. So I called home, and when I got that call, they said the fly czar at Uncle Feather Merchants wants you to call them. So I called them, and he told me immediately, and this is never done before. He said, without even seeing your fly, I got a call from Lefty saying that I need to get this fly immediately. Lefty called. He said, this is the next big fly, and you guys got to have it. So they said, how many colors, how many sizes, what type of species can you replicate? I said, sand eels, glass minnows, bay anchovies, all that. He goes, all right, I want 6 colors, 3 sizes, and whatever different styles. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So that's why I always called Lefty the Godfather. Whatever Lefty says happens. And Flip always said before the internet, and this was before all that, Lefty was our internet. He always was connecting people and all that kind of stuff to make things work for you. So
I love that.
Yeah. So what I did is I just connected that 1/16 of an inch of the silver to the back of the hook, and now I'm just going to wrap this. So I call this technique fly construction, because it's more building the fly from the inside out. And if I want this fly to dive quickly, you could put a cone up front. You can invert it to make it more clouser jigging style, or you can put lead wire on it so it gets down. But if fish are right on the surface and you want the fly to stay up in that zone, I don't weight it. So you can see the body that's created here, very similar to wrapping lead wire, but I'm not adding much weight to it.
And Blane,
Right?
folks can get this stuff from your website.
Yeah, you can get it from me. I mean, any fly shops all over the country. This has been around for a very long time. So,
Yep.
so I'm going to tie one that's probably maybe 3 inches long or 2.5 inches long. So I'm going to take this silver again, and I'm going to build a little underbelly of this material. So this material is usually 12 inches by 2 inches wide. So I'm going to cut about a 1/2 inch wide strip by 2 inches. All right. So now next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this right down the center and make a pair of pants. So out of all the flies I've created, I get probably cussed at more by this fly than any of them. Right. So let me go ahead and whip finish this and get rid of this thread real quick. I'll add it back in a second. All right.
You have a question from a fellow named Tony. It says, Mr. Chocklett, where does one find silken thread for these mystical aquatic beasts?
Talking about the black fly larva.
Yeah, right. I know there used to be, that was kind of the secret, is like that silken thread, right? But is that Tony, our Tony?
Just maybe.
Yeah, just maybe. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to show, this is the secret way to do this. Like, not secret, but this is how I've always done it. I always people get really angry about tying this fly because they get stuck to it. And this is not very forgiving once it sticks to itself. So I'm going to take that top corner, being that I'm right-handed, and I'm going to start peeling that backing off. A little bit at a time, readjust my fingers to get it back to where it comes off the backing until I get it all the way off. And don't stretch from here, because if you do, it's going to snap and it's going to roll up on itself and you're not going to be happy. So I just let it release. I readjust my hand, so I've got it right here. I'm going to spread the pant legs away from each other, just like that. So I have it on my left thumb, and I'm going to lay this on the underside, and I'm going to bring it up underneath where that slit was made, and bring it behind the eye of the hook, right in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so it's going to look like that. And all you have to do at this point is fold it up on one side, hold it on the other, and fold it up without stretching it. Don't stretch it, just let it lay. And don't worry about it if it doesn't completely come together evenly. All right, so what I'm doing is building that belly sack now that you see on a bay anchovy or silver side, right? So I'm cutting most of that off. And then I'm going to cut it straight on the top. And you see how it's kind of not right on the back right now? So what I'm going to do is just cut that off and then pop it.
Wow, it always comes down to the technique, how you do it. You should have seen me trying to do it this past summer.
Oh, yeah. So instead of having that squared, I just took my scissors and just made a slight angle to that nose, right?
Yeah.
So I have the belly sack made. If you look at a bay anchovy, you'll see that they have that silver belly sack. And then you have to create that lateral silver line down the side. So what I'm going to do now is, like, if I want to tie one about this big, I'm going to use this silver, which is 2 inches. I'm going to do the same thing. Cut it, the width of it, about a 1/2 inch wide. Make another pair of pant legs. So I'm repeating that same thing. So I have the pant legs done. So I'm going to repeat the exact same thing I just did. So I want the silly skid down, and I'm going to start peeling the backing off again. And again, a little bit at a time. I'll do this once I can get it pulled off. All right. A little bit at a time here. And I readjust as I go down. All right, so it's attached to that thumb. I'm going to readjust it to my left thumb. I'm going to pull it apart, just like that. Open pant leg, bring it up underneath again, and let it adhere to what I already created previously. Fold the opposite side up again, and let that side lay away from you. See how that's laying away?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to hold the side closest to me, and I'm going to let it all come together again without stretching it. Just tap it together all the way down. Release your hand. So it's nice and stuck together. All right. And I'm going to come a little bit taller this time and cut a straight line. All right. Again, I want to take that square off, so I'm going to angle that again.
Is the scissor you're using important? The style of scissor?
Yeah, for this you want straight scissors for sure, and I like using longer. These happen. I don't even know where I got these. I've had these forever, but these have been very good. But yeah, any straight long scissor I think is great. Probably good to have serrated edges on at least one side. So now, if you just, depending on what bait fish you're trying to emulate, do you want to use a green back? Do you want to use a tan back? Kind of the red or pink or whatever. So I'm just going to use like a green splash here. And so I'm going to cut this long ways now, and I'm going to cut it kind of at an angle as I go back. All right. So this is what it's going to kind of look like here.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like a long triangle, right? So now I'm gonna do the same thing. So I'm gonna peel that backing off. This is the hardest part of this. I can't see. All right. So, I always also with this fly, I always considered this fly a failure, even though it's been very successful for, more than 20 years, just because it didn't do what I wanted it to do in the water. And
Mm-hmm.
this is a kind of a precursor to the Game Changer platform, because that was my ultimate goal, is to get a fly that would swim like these soft plastics did, that non-mechanical motion that was very erratic, very similar to your part of the world where you use the hoagies,
Mm-hmm.
that super erratic motion where they just love it.
Yep.
So now I'm just holding the sticky side at the front, and I'm going to hold it in the back, and I'm going to lay this right behind the eye, right on the top of the spine. And I'll hold the underneath of the silver and just let it lay right down the center of that spine without stretching it. Do not stretch it. If you stretch it, it's going to want to come back, and then that's going to make your fly coil up.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now I'm just going to tap it down the sides to roll that over to give it that three-dimensional look. And notice this is going to be a little bit longer, and that's what I want. All right. So now if you look at it, we're starting to create more depth, more three-dimensional type of fly. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create that lateral line, that lateral silver stripe that a lot of these bay anchovies and silver sides have on them. So I'm just going to cut that a straight line till I get to that belly sack, and then I'm going to cut that off. All right. So now you almost have the bait fish that you're looking for at this point. But the secret and the magic of this is the clear mother of pearl. Even though this looks red because of the red backing, this actually has a scale pattern on it. This, by putting this on there, it really brings the fly to life. You could probably catch a fish like this. But so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add some eyes. So what I'll do is I'm going to take some curved scissors, and I'm going to cut out an eye socket on each side where the eyes would go. And then it's going to let that eye set into that socket. I usually use a little bit bigger eyes because generally bay anchovies, silver sides have large eyes, so they could see the predators coming to eat them, right? But you could do them without eyes if you don't believe in eyes. But I just, since This fly, since it doesn't have that swimming action I wanted to make sure that this fly looked, and the reason this fly has been so successful is you can match the hatch exactly to whatever bait you're trying to emulate. And instead of throwing it into the albies that can be very discriminating at times, I'll throw it in there and tight line it and keep it in the melee as long as possible, because a lot of the flies we throw, they don't look exactly like the bait that they're eating. So you want to kind of move it so they can't get a good eye on it. This, I want them to see it. I want them to look at it. I want them to scrutinize it.
Yeah.
And they eat it. So this is a fly that I don't move much. I'll twitch it, just keep a tight line as it stinks through the melee, and usually gets eaten pretty good. So
Cool.
The next step here is I'm going to take this mother of pearl, and I'm going to make this a little bit longer than the fly, because I'm going to create a tail out of this. It's kind of and obviously we don't need this whole wide strip right here. So, a lot of the times if I'm trying to save material, I'll cut it at an angle so I could use it for the next fly. But since we're doing this, I'm just going to cut it straight. All right.
And
So
Blane, while you're at it, what size is that eye?
I have no idea. I just grabbed them. I don't know.
Okay. A question from somebody in the audience here, Joel.
It's about a 6 millimeter. This one, I think that's
Great.
what it was.
Another eye question was whether you ever have used doll eyes on these flies.
I have not used doll eyes. What I used to do back in the day before we had the 3D eyes, I'd use tape eyes, and I would put them on the outside and put a little bit. So I can't remember when Loon first came out with the UV resin. It used to be UV Knot Sense. And I started using that. As soon as that came out, I knew it was for weight. They had UV Knot Sense, and they had UV Waiter Patch. And as soon as that Waiter Patch came out, because it was more of a, I guess, rubbery type of material that would be cured by UV light, I started using that, and I would coat that over the eyes to keep them on. But once we had 3D eyes, I just cut the eye sockets out, put them in, and then cover the whole thing with this pearl. So the pearl, I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to have the sticky side or the gummy side facing me. So I'm going to pull a little bit at a time, let it release, come back to where the center of it is, where it attaches to the backing, and keep going until you get to the end. All right. So now I'm going to take, if you're right-handed, take your pointer finger and your middle finger and grab each side, and then release it, and it should look something like that. So now all I have to do is take my back pointer finger and middle and thumb and go right down the middle, right at the eye. You can even cover the eye, but make it down the center. And I'll get my fingers up under here and bring it right down the middle. And then release my fingers and let it adhere to that very back. All right. So when you see that, you can see what I did when I turn it to you.
Yeah.
So the next thing is I'll hold it here, and I'm just going to fold everything around. And notice I didn't stretch anything. Everything is the exact way it came off the backing. When you stretch this stuff and try to stick it on, that's where you start running into these coils and stuff.
Good point.
So now I'm just adhering it to itself. And once you do that, the stuff, you could pull it, more than 2 times its original size, and it goes back to its shape. So now I'm just going to clean that up, make sure everything's right. And now I'm just going to cut the outline of a bait fish, and I have to take it out of the vise here. So I'm going to take curved scissors to create that kind of round belly that you get with a lot of baits. And I scored that so I can pop that off. And then I'm going to come to the back, and I'm going to create a tail, and I'm going to use my curved scissors for that as well. So I'm going to cut a little V shape out in the back to create that tail. So I started that tail part, and I'm going to use the curved scissors to create the underside of it. So stuff is translucent, so I can't see it very well. So can you see that all right?
Very well.
Yeah,
All right, perfect. So now I'm just going to follow that contour and kind of create that belly of a minnow,
that's incredible.
Wow.
I had
right?
no idea how you did. I had
No
no
idea.
idea that this is how
So
you do
now you
this.
got a gummy minnow.
That's
So
incredible.
Wow.
so next thing you want to do is you want to take your thread and just seal that front nose off, right? And by doing that, you can pull down with your thread tight, and that'll score that material where I can pick it off
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
and then tie that down nice and clean and wet finish it.
Did you ever try doing the fly without thread at the head?
I did, but what I found is I needed a thread base for the material to stick to,
Right.
because the material, if it was just on a bare shank, it would slide off of it.
Right.
So I needed to have that. So that's pretty much the gummy,
That's so
though.
cool. That's
That's
awesome.
great.
Well, and aptly named.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, it'll stick to you. I've been cussed more than once.
There, Brian, there's a question here about the difference between silly skin and the gummy skin.
Yeah, well, the gummy skin probably is the same thing. I mean, at one point, I think I changed names,
Okay.
for whatever reason. Who knows? But
At
it's
least you didn't
probably,
call it the condom skin.
yeah, right. Yeah, no,
But I might be dating myself, but when I was a kid, we used to have this stuff we'd inject into these heatable molds called creepy crawlers. And I remember putting hooks in creepy crawlers and trying to catch largemouth bass in the backyard pond.
that's that's perfect.
Well, I'm embarrassed because I actually thought originally that these gummies were molded. I had no idea how you built it. That's amazing. So
Yeah,
you said something. So this is incredible, Blaine, and I thank you. That was really amazing. But you
amazing.
said something that I want to pick up on as a segue to the game changer, which was actually you ultimately were not happy with this fly. It looks so beautiful. Why?
It didn't have the movement I was looking for. I was looking for that three-dimensional swimming action, that darting left and right, and it
Yep.
just goes through the water like a stick. So, but it's been very successful on sight feeding type of fish. If
Yep.
you're in a situation where you got a fish coming, very spooky situations, whether it's snook in super clear water, super technical, bonefish, tarpon,
Mm.
albies, tunas, you name it. I mean, this fly has caught a bunch of fish all over the world. I just wasn't happy with it because it didn't do what I designed it to do. You know,
Mhm.
my
Mhm.
trout background got me to the realism, but it didn't have that movement that I wanted. So there's a guy named Doug Hannon, the bass professor, way back when in the
Yep.
late 90s, early 2000s, that had a TV show called The Bass
Yeah, I
Professor.
remember.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he had this concept called triggering qualities and um, attractive qualities. So, one of the last things a fish does before they eat something is that the food item that they generally eat, unless they have turbid water where they're just relying on their lateral lines or whatever. And this fly has that last thing. It's the food item that I'm eating constantly, and
Mhm.
that's why it's been successful. But to me, I want to have that. I want to have both in my fly designs. I want to have triggering, and I want to have attracting qualities.
Mhm.
And you could kind of we don't have enough time to dive into all that stuff, and that's really on my mind now because I'm getting ready to do a couple big presentations down in Texas, and that's what the presentation is going to be on. It's predators and their prey and designing flies that trigger strikes, right?
Uh,
So,
yeah.
and that's what my book was based on, and that moves me on to the next segment, which is the game changer
Yeah.
platform.
Quick question. Somebody wants to know how durable is that fly?
It's super durable. I could show you how durable it is. You could stretch it super far, and how far is that, right? A foot.
Yeah.
It's going to come back. And to be honest, I used to do this all the time. I mean, I'll take this perfectly good fly and cut it in half. So it's cut in half, and then I
Oh
can
no.
I can bring it right back together, and it's going to adhere back to itself and be
Oh,
as good
wow.
as new.
That's crazy.
Well,
So
Phil
that's how
McCartney, I
durable
guess
that
that
fly
answers
is.
your question.
Yeah, that's how durable that is. You can stretch it again.
Wow.
All
Well,
right,
that's pretty amazing.
let's talk about the game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Game Changer platform, came probably, I don't know, another 7, 8 years later after different iterations of this fly, which you guys showed previously in some of the content leading up to tonight. Um,
Yeah,
and
actually, I'm gonna put that up real fast because I thought that was really cool. Let me just
Yeah.
you can keep talking. I'm just gonna throw this up on the screen real fast here.
sure.
Let's see here.
So, since all this stuff kind of goes back to Bob, and like I said, he was a great friend and mentor to me. I was always bouncing ideas off of him. I thought it was going to be great years ago to back myself in a corner and become a musky fly fishing guide. Let's go take one of the hardest fish in the world to catch on any rod and reel, and just target them on fly rod. So, Bobby, at that time, created the beast flies and the reverse tying and all that. And that was a big part of my program, trying to figure out how to catch muskies consistently. And, moving forward, I was targeting big trophy trout and smallmouth bass and all that kind of stuff. And still working on that platform of trying to get that three-dimensional swimming action with the realism of a fish. And, I went through whatever the pictures that you have up, or
Yeah, here.
I can't see them.
Here. This is the
Okay.
articulated one there. Yep.
Can you still see me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So, that was one of the second or third generations of this, started playing with the silly skin idea, three-dimensional shapes, using foam in it. Some of them I'd put foam that didn't, I would open cell foam that didn't absorb water, that would sink. And I was getting that three-dimensional swimming action, but I was using that lip, and it was a pain to cast. It wasn't fly fishing, but it achieved that goal. And, at that same time, Seville Magic Swimmers came out. There was a lot of these lipless swim baits that came out that had that super swimmy action. And Henry Cowan, who I think is on here tonight,
Yeah, he's on
Yeah,
tonight.
it is.
he got in touch with Shaw Grigsby, who I think was working with Spro or something. And I got him to ask him, because I'd been playing with this, and I could get some flies to swim, some wouldn't without a lip. And he asked him, he's like, I wanted him to ask, what is the secret sauce to get that swimming action without that lip on it? And one of the engineers got back to him, and he told him, it's like, one of the things is the shape of the head. So I started playing around with that, and not being an engineer or any of that kind of stuff, I had to trial by error. It's like, throw me in the fire and I'll figure it out. It's like, smart I ain't. So, my dad always said, if you're going to be stupid, you better be smart. You better be tough. So that's kind of the program I've been living. That's why I always tell everybody I'm on the struggle bus. So anyway, moving forward, I finally created the Game Changer platform. But my traditions, I was wanting to get away from synthetics, and the tradition side of me is I wanted to create the same fly using natural materials. And a great fly that Bob always said is a great fly design comes from problem solving. And for me, my big problem was creating really large flies that had that three-dimensional swimming action. Not taking anything away from the beast flies or any of that, but he was relying on that profile and silhouette being castable, but he was relying on the feathers and the bucktail to be kind of, swimming in the water. For me, muskies, they needed more than that. They needed something that had something that turned hard in the water, showed profile, silhouette, but they also wanted that swimming action that really triggered that innate, I'm going to eat that, right? So my goal was obviously to keep moving forward and just taking what I had and creating it. And and all that. And that's where the T-bone fly came from. And we don't really have enough time to go through all of this stuff, but moving forward, I created the bucktail game changers and the deer body game changers and all that. But the negative to those flies is anytime you use deer hair or any of that, so the materials in there, they're hollow, right? So you create some kind of neutral buoyancy or slightly buoyant stuff. So it requires weight. And kind of going back to Gary Loomis's design, weight is a deterrent from performance. And when you're trying to create a swim bait type fly, adding weight does not help you with that swimming action and that stop and hover. So I had to figure out, and I was in Arkansas doing a fly tying demonstration at a fly shop down there, and I had a day to go fishing, and I was looking at their flies. They were using double deceivers and other stuff, so I tied up, a bunch of 6 to 7 inch deer body bucktail changers, and they didn't release water during that time. So we had a high pressure system, windy, not a great time to go targeting big predator brown trout. Low light, rainy days, that kind of thing is great for them. Not so clear water, but the water's super clear, super bright day, windy, not a great chance of catching big browns. But that fly was triggering browns to come at it, but they were veering off right as it got to the boat. And one of my problems was, even when we were using sinking lines, the buoyancy of that fly and the way I was swimming it, it wasn't getting down in that strike zone where they felt comfortable. And they were turning off within 10, 15 foot of the boat because they were seeing us. So I ended up taking stuff that I learned. So I'm going to do a tail of a feather changer. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm talking so I don't keep going. So this fly is going to probably be 4.5 inches long. And I usually make the tail about 15% of the length of the fly. So it's going to be about 1.5 inches.
And that's a shank you have in there in the
Yep.
vise?
Yeah, I have a 10 millimeter shank in here right now. So
Okay.
So I have that tail in there. Hold on, I'm gonna add it a little bit bigger here. It's been a second since I tied this size fly. There we go. And I'm gonna cut off the stems here. And just clean that up. So one thing I learned here in my home waters with muskies, when you have super clear water, and fish have a lot of time to look at what you're throwing at them, speed kills. So I started throwing the fly out, putting the rod under my hand, just like you do in saltwater, and doing a 2-hand strip really fast. And I ended up getting like a 28-inch brown on one of those flies I tied for that day. But even though I caught that, I'd seen bigger ones, 30, 32s, 30 whatevers. And I was like, well, this fly will work, obviously, but it wasn't perfect. So I get back from Arkansas and I call Bob. And I'm like, Bob, I got a problem. I was like, this fly works and it triggers the strikes and all this kind of stuff, but it's just doesn't, it's too buoyant to get it to do exactly what I want it to do. And he goes, but I want to use natural fibers, and just because. And he goes, have you ever thought about using feathers like my Semper fly? And I'm like, as soon as he said it, it just light bulb. It's like, I know I could see it in my mind now. So hung up with him. I tied the first feather game changer, which I'm tying right now. And I took it up to the bathroom, poured water in the tub and swam it. And it swam better than any fly I've ever tied. And it had the sink rate that I wanted because the feathers, once they get wet, they start absorbing and they sink better. So the fly gets down in the zone quicker. And the rest is history. And that was one of those moments I told you about Bobby and what made him so great. So what I'm doing with this, so you can see that I used that 10 millimeter shank and I took the tail back. So now I'm going to fill in this gap here. So now I'm going to create the wrist of the fish, and I'm using hen saddles. And the reason I use hen is because the feathers are soft and they're very webby, and they block water flow. One of the key ingredients of making a game changer type fly is water cannot go through the fly. And that's the difference between like a bucktail game changer and a beast fly. Bobby always wanted it to be super sparse and light, and using the outer materials. But if water can flow through the fly, it tracks through the water like this. If you divert water through the center, water's always trying to find the path of least resistance. So it goes away and then it's trying to find its way back. But in the meantime, when you create shanks, you're creating basically a beginning where it hits the first one and it creates a chain reaction where you start getting this swimming action. But if water can flow through all that material, it will not swim. It doesn't matter if you have 100 shanks on there. So you have to divert water flow. And one way to do that is creating a barrier, right? And using webby feathers. And I took 2 webby feathers on a hen saddle at the very base, the smallest part of the feather, shortest part. So again, we're making the wrist of the fly. This is the smallest part right in front of the tail. So I take 2 of these, and I'm just basically, I'm gonna tie it curve side down and tie that in about halfway up the shank.
And again, you're using what size thread there?
6/0.
Okay.
So now I'm just gonna expose the tips. So all I'm doing is basically going super old school now. So tie that down nice and tight and bring your thread forward right behind the eye. Now I'm going to take these 2 hackles and I'm going to fold them back and help them wrap around that shank. And what this does, I don't have anything holding that feather up. And by tying it in by the tips, they automatically want to stand up just like you're doing a soft hackle. So this is kind of a lot of old school stuff right here. Stuff that's been around forever, putting it on a different platform. All right, so I've created that tail now, and I can just trim off that stem. All right, and I'll fold the fibers back, clean it up, give yourself a nice tie off area. And see how that material lays back now? So that kind of flows into that tail of the fly. So you can whip finish this. You could use UV resin, super glue, whatever.
That's interesting. Quick question.
Yep.
From somebody out there. Do you ever, instead of tying onto a shank, do you ever tie this portion onto a stinger?
Yes, I have. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So we have a bugger changer that's on the market that we put that on a stinger for swinging for short striking fish. Yep. If you wanted to use it for steelhead swinging or whatever, I put the hook right here in the tail for that. Fishing obviously like up in Alaska and whatnot, or Midwest or up your way in the Great Lakes waters. It works fine.
Excellent.
So
that's another 10 millimeter shank there.
That's another 10. So what I'm going to do on this is I'm going to do 3 10s, a hook, 2 15s, and a hook. Okay.
Wow.
So I don't know what we have time wise. I've been running my mouth.
We got some time.
We'll be here all night. We're good.
All right.
If all you folks are willing to stay, so are we.
All right. So now I'm going to create a base. So as you get away from the tail, right,
this is a really important question from Jason Taylor. Who's the most handsome fly tyer in Philadelphia?
Jason, by all means.
Just had to ask, right, Jason?
Oh yeah. Might be Steve. I don't know. So I'm going to use a material, what I call a support or a prop material here. And this happens to be my finesse chenille or my finesse brush.
Yeah.
And I'm going to, instead of coming all the way back to the back of the shank where the eye is, I'm going to move forward a little bit. And I'm only going to use a couple wraps of this. So I'm going to tie this in about, I don't know, maybe an 1/8 inch forward from that back eye. And let me grab some wire cutters here so I don't mess my scissors up. All right, so I'm going to trim off that wire. And the cool thing about this fly is it's repetition, but you have to understand how you create taper. So I'm going to do 2 wraps here on this, and that's going to put me about halfway up that shank.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm going to tie that off with 1 wrap, and I'll probably cut my thread here. Oh, I didn't. So now I'm going to tie that down.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you could see how these fibers are, but I'm going to trim them. So basically how you create the perfect taper on a game changer platform, right? So you don't want to have too much coverage, very similar to how you would do a beast fly, or I think a beast probably is the perfect example of that. So you don't want the fibers to stack on top of each other, because then it's just going to look like a big blob of nothing, right?
Right.
So the way you create taper is you take this back section, and I only want it to cover halfway up the back section. So the support is only going to cover halfway up that feather that I just made.
Mm-hmm.
So I cut the fly in thirds. Back thirds 50% coverage. The middle third will be 2/3 coverage, and then the shoulders and head would be 3/4. Right.
Wow.
So that's how I create that taper. So knowing that, I'm going to take this hen saddle again, and I'm going to go, just happens to be the way they genetically made these, and this happens to be a Metz Magnum hen that I've used forever. About every 2 rows, it kind of jumps up about 20%.
Mm-hmm.
So if I come up here to about 2 rows up, it's going to be the perfect size feathers for my next section, which is really cool, being that it's a natural material.
Mm-hmm.
That is interesting.
So I have 2 feathers. I marry them together. I get rid of all the the oily stuff at the base. I don't want any of that, because that's going to lay down and not look good. So I get rid of all that stuff. Marry them together again. Make sure they're even. Hold it at the very tips, and then spread them down. So you create yourself a nice tie-in point, and you tie this curved side down like you would a saw tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And then expose those tips, trim them off, bring your thread to the eye, and you're going to repeat that first process. And you can get creative with this fly and do 3-dimensional color schemes, where if I wanted to get super techie and make a sculpin-y whatever type of fly or whatever, I might use a different core material, which would be the support. And I may add white as the base, and then put maybe a light olive over the white, and maybe a grizzly over those. So 3 feathers. And then once that fly's done, it looks like it's like a fish. It's like it's almost like building like an artist does, where they build that base and then build colors over it.
You know, Blane, while you're going in that creative direction, Alex Early has a really fascinating question. With all the innovation and seeing people take the Game Changer platform and tie it with new materials, what is the coolest or most unique one you've seen? And how did it feel to see someone take your platform and adapt it to something crazy?
That is a good question. I'm gonna have to think about that one. And to be honest, here recently, I haven't been on the internet much and haven't been going to shows, so I haven't seen anything crazy lately. There's some obviously amazing tires out there that are doing great work with the platform. Like Chase Smith in Texas does beautiful work. The Schulte crew up in Michigan. I would say, one of the coolest, I think, variations of this fly to me would probably be Schulte's Leggy Boy. And he took the swimming action of the changer platform and added rubber legs all over it, right? If you haven't seen that fly, it's amazing on bass and redfish and a variety of different species. And basically created almost like a tube fly. or a tube
Mm.
bait. It's got all
Wow.
these crazy rubber legs hanging off of it, or a creature bait. And the idea is that let it hover in the current and just let it swing and whatever, and it just catches them. I mean, it's one of the most popular smallmouth flies on the market now.
Hmm.
I would probably say that one just because that's coming to mind. And Schulte was just down here. We were doing a smallmouth camp, and that's one of the top flies that we used for that week. So that might be the first one that comes to mind.
That's fascinating. It's
Um,
interesting how people love taking your platform and making their own creations.
yeah, that's what it's all about. So I just did the same thing using the same size support, and I'm going to add one more. I came back a little bit further when I attached the support brush. So I'm going to get 3 to 3.5 wraps on this one because I was back a little bit further. And by adding that, it's going to create more support as I go forward, creating that height that I'm trying to create, much like you do one of Bobby's beast flies, right? So you see how hackle's kind of going everywhere. That's all right. And now I might tip trim some of this because I don't want it to cover more than halfway. All right, so I've got that. And I'm going to go up another 2 rows, grab 2 more feathers, get rid of the under fur. And once you get dialed in on these flies, you can go pretty quick with them.
What size brush is that?
This is my finesse brush and the inch, 1 inch.
1 inch.
Yep, 1 inch. So make sure you get the fluff out of there, the oily fluff, I should say. And sometimes these feathers don't want to cooperate. They want to roll on you. Just force them back and they'll start behaving.
Is there flash in your brush?
This one is a very subtle translucent flash. It's not like a hard metallic or prismatic flash. It's more of a I call it finesse because our fisheries are obviously not getting they're not getting any bigger. They're getting smaller and get more people, and some of the attracting qualities like flash and bright colors and clear water, I'm seeing a lot more negative response to that. So for me, I'm always kind of looking for something that's going to help me get some of these ultimate predators that I'm trying to target. So I started creating these more translucent kind of subtle flashes. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, totally. And I think given the motion and all the other triggering aspects of this platform, it probably don't need the flash as much.
Yeah.
Yep. So now you can see how I'm starting to gain height. It's smaller back here at the tail and starting to get bigger as we go forward. See how it's getting that taper? So now I've got 3 sections. I'm going to add a little stinger hook since it's smallmouth season and striper season around the corner. A lot of times for smallmouth, we use stingers on these bigger bass because obviously they don't have a big mouth, and where this fly is going to be around 4.5, 5 inches.
And
Sometimes they don't
which
get
hook?
that front hook, so we kind of help ourselves out by putting a little bit of insurance in the back.
Which hook are you using there?
This is an Arex 274 size 4.
Okay.
And you'll notice I wrap slightly down that bend and really cover that shank well with thread. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take one of my 15 millimeter shanks and I'm going to open it wide as I can. See how open that is? I don't know if you can see that or not.
Yeah, we can see it real well there. Yep.
All right. So notice that I flip it upside down and notice that it kind of adheres to the contour of this shank of this hook. Yeah. When I start wrapping it, and the reason I opened it up so much is I can keep it right on top of the hook shank. And I can use, even though I'm using 6/0 thread, if I was going to do this at home, I mean, without doing it in front of you all, I'd probably put a bead of Zap-A-Gap or something at the base just to kind of help it secure it. So I'm wrapping down, and I'm going to wrap down to this bend, the opening of this eye. And once I get down there, right, I'm going to pull down and see how it kind of locks into the curvature of the hook.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to go back up and really secure this now. So what that does is it sets directly on top of the hook. All right, so now I'm going to close that. I'm going to just cover up that eye of the shank. Instead of cutting that off, I want it on there because that gives stability on top of it and it doesn't allow it to kind of roll over. It's going to stay in place better.
Right.
All right, so now I'm just going to take that back section and I'm just going to run it through. And now I'm just going to push my finger down and close that section off. And now we have a closed shank. And on this one, I'm going to variegate. I'm going to do support feather on this section. All right. So I'm going to use this 1 inch one more time. And it's going to be all the way back against the eye of that shank. So that's going to close off that distance, right? Because I don't want to create gaps, right? So that's the biggest problem I see. So when you create gaps, you create disturbance and flow. So I want to make sure that we don't have any gaps. So I come all the way back with this, and I'll probably be doing 3 to 4 wraps of this material because it's so far back and we have a lot bigger platform now. So I fold this material back each wrap, and I put these butted up against each other. You don't want to do loose spiral wraps. You want them to be super tight. All right, there's 3. So that's about right. So 3.5. I'm going to tie that down. And now I'm going to trim it, the wire. Keep this here because I'll use it again. All right, now see how I created that taper and I don't have to trim anything? See how that flows nicely into the back part of the fly? So now I'm just going to go up another 2 levels on the feathers.
You have a question from the boys from Wyoming, Todd Pomeroy, saying, "Are those loon wire cutters? Have you ever seen someone break a pair of those?" I suspect there's a story behind that.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I think we broke some in front of him. We sure did. What's up, guys? Good dudes. All right, so now we're trimming that extra. I'm gonna come forward, and now I'm just gonna wrap this back just like we did prior. Make sure if it rolls on you, you can kind of force it back into place. This one's kind of wanting to roll on me, so I have to readjust my fingers as I wrap it. And you also want these wraps to be butted directly on top of each other. Don't separate them. That's really important here. Hate to say it, I might need glasses, guys.
Welcome to the club.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah, buddy. All right, so I get to the end, and I'm gonna wrap that down. All right, and you'll notice on this one, the height difference starting to get taller, creating that taper that I'm looking for.
And you're working your way up onto the cape when you're picking your feathers, right?
Yes.
To re-emphasize.
Start here and gradually work up to you're going to get these super big, wide, webby feathers at the very top.
Right.
Yep. So you can see that nice taper that we've created now. Great. So it's now starting to look like a profile of a fish.
Yep.
So now I'm just going to add this is going to be the last time I use the the 1 inch. I'm going to switch off to 1.5. I'm going to butt this right up against the feathers. I'm not going to creep forward at all. And I'm going to make about 3 wraps here. All right. So if it's all kind of weird on you, just fold it back and tie over it. All right. So see how I created more height right there? So we're getting more height as we work forward. And I'm going to create that same height by creating the right feathers. And you can gauge this just like you do like the old trout dry fly gauges.
Mm-hmm.
Same concept. So you could literally, before you use it, fold it around and make sure it's not going to be too big, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I lost that feather. Damn it. I got to pick 2 more off. Just lost it. It's really cool how these just sometimes things are meant to be, right? And what I found going back to the flow and diversion of water and all that is you're not pushing water, you're diverting water, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the big thing with this is what I found is you have something that's called turbulent flow and laminar flows. All right. Laminar flow is more of like a sports car, more of a straight line flow. Turbulent flows, you're going to have, it's just going to be all over the place. And the more laminar flow you have, the easier the fly will swim.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that if I had flatter, webbier materials, just like a feather, you know how flat they are and how straight they are, and the way water flows over it, it flows over it super easy. You get your easiest and best swimming action. So then I started trying to figure out synthetic materials that would work like feathers, because feathers are hard to come by. And that's kind of where the finesse material came from. So think about like say like Flashaboo, something like that, a super soft Flashaboo, something that's flat like that. You're going to get a much better swimming action using fibers like that on the outside of the fly than you would using a curly material that's
Mm-hmm.
going to slow down water flow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. So right to the head here. Just all right. Tie that off and you'll see this taper. I don't know if we're going, how are we doing on time?
You're good. We're in overtime, but we still got a wrapped audience, so I think you're
Right.
fine.
Yeah.
All right.
Let the man cook, as they said in the chat here.
All right. So here we go, finishing that part. Now we're going to go back to shanks. So for me on the Game Changer platform, I want at least 4 to 5 shanks, because what you're creating is vertebrae, right? And the more like a snake, the more vertebrae you have, the more serpentine action you get. So that's why I'll use generally my favorites like 6 or 7. That's kind of my favorite. So now we have a hook, we have 3 shanks, and I'm going to add 2 more. So I'm going to kind of use a shank that's similar to the size we just used, which is a 15. And the fact that we're getting bigger now, I can do this part and only do 1 support and pop that in there here.
Blane, while you're wrestling with that, um, Alan Berger wants to, if you could do a brief discussion on the difference between regular chenille and the brush in the densities of the two and how they compare.
Like my finesse chenille and the
Yeah,
brush.
yeah.
Well, the one of the big reasons I wanted to come out with the finesse brush was we are very limited on how much of how big the chenille can be. So when we go to the chenille manufacturers, they have machines that are designed to make the chenille a certain width from side to side. And the biggest width that we can get is about 2.25, something like that, wide from the core. So you're limited on how big of a fly you can make. So I just took the material that finesse chenille is made out of and just started getting it made on brushes so we could make them 3-4 inches wide and get the profiles and all that stuff that we want, and not limited to just tying flies that are this big. So now we can tie them, however big you want.
Yeah.
That was the reason behind that. It's the same material, just you're able to make it bigger. And the other side is, if you're like with that chenille, I mean the brush, chenille obviously can kind of get cut through with bluefish and whatever. The wire cores they don't have that happen. And, I've caught many bluefish on like a finesse changer that were mimicking like a big silver side or sardine or whatever. And it just holds up because they can't cut through the wire base.
Mm-hmm.
And being that it's synthetic materials, I've caught plenty of bluefish on one fly as long as you have wire leader. So that was another reason for it, is I wanted longevity on it, and that helped create that. So
Excellent. That was a good question we had.
yeah, very good. So now I went up to a 1.5-inch brush. So I'm just kind of going with the same. I'm going to probably go with about 4.5 wraps to 5 wraps here, pulling down tight. I'll kind of gauge it based on how the fibers look when I get done. And as you get bigger with the fibers, it's not a bad idea to have some kind of a pick to pick out stuff that you overwrap, or a brush to comb it out. So notice how I'm always folding it back and training the fibers. So the idea here is to get halfway up the shank. And I'm right there right now. So I'm going to hold that and tie it down. And I'm going to trim the excess off. And again, I'm just going to fold the fibers back and get rid of the bad stuff. And if I have a little bit of height here that I don't like, that doesn't kind of flow with the fly, I'll trim a little bit, which I want to right here. I don't want it to get too big. Again, this should cover 2/3 the previous section now, not the whole. So I'm going to trim off to where it's about 2/3 coverage. And you'll see at the end of the fly that this fly is going to have a very good profile and perfect silhouette to it. It's not going to get too fat too early unless you're trying to create a bluegill type of profile and silhouette. So that's trimmed the way I want it. And now I'm just going to finish it off with feathers. And I'm going to go up higher up on the saddle again. And a lot of times, depending on how good the saddle is and how long the fibers that I want to use, I might go to 3 feathers at this point, because sometimes they're just not very long and they got more fluff. I mean, oily feathers and not the right feathers that I want. And what I'm referring to when I talk about that is, if you see this part of the feather here, this is not what I want. I want to get rid of all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's got oil in it, and it's going to compress, and it's going to lay down, and it's not going to hold the shape that I want the fly to have. So I get rid of all that stuff. And obviously, once you do that, you've got less than half the feather, right? So that's part of the problem with that. So here we go. I'll peel those off. I'm going to use 3 on this one, just in case I need it. And by adding an extra feather, it's less wraps you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
It's like Bobby said, business up front, party in the back, you know?
Yeah.
So adding this 3 feathers here is going to allow me to kind of come in and fill this gap up that I have to fill up here. All right. So nothing new. You just kind of hold them in place and wrap them forward. And if you ever get to a point where you have too much shank still exposed up front, just add another feather wrap till it's complete. That's a good thing about this is you can just kind of fix any issue you might have. All right. So now I'm right at the eye and I want to hold that in place, tie that stem down, trim that stem off the 3, and clean up that eye and whip finish it. All right, part's done.
Wow.
So now what I'd like is I'm going to have one more shank. I know it's repetition here, but we could tell some more stories while I'm going through this last part.
Yeah.
Well, we have a very two good questions. So Tim Davidson was asking if there are any resources you can suggest to folks here to learn more about the science of water flows. He said he's seen some of Larry Dahlberg's stuff. I know Larry's a good buddy of yours. Any other resources you can suggest?
That's a great question. I'd love to know that answer too. Uh, all my stuff has been trial by fire, right? So, or asking Larry, Larry knows so much. He's got such a wealth of knowledge on that stuff. And most of his was just by doing it too. So, I would say Larry. I'll ask him that question if he knows of a book that or some kind of literature that might explain that a little bit more. But I've been fortunate to meet some engineers that kind of not kind of, but they explained stuff to me in that way and kind of gave me that, helped me with that knowledge of knowing that it's laminar flow is what I'm talking about.
Right.
So you had experienced it and seen it and then didn't know the language for it, right? And they just confirmed it.
Correct. Yeah.
Interesting.
Fascinating.
Well, I know what the other question Lou wanted to pick out of the crowd, and I'm going to ask it. This is from Henry Cowan.
Oh Lord.
Oh yeah, I know. Here comes Blane. We love Staten Island pizza, but as a tribute to Bob, what's the best dish at the Shady Rest in your opinion?
The Fraviavlo sauce. that was Bobby always when I went to visit him. He would send me that. He'd send me that, or he'd take me over to his place just down the street from his house to get one of the rolls for breakfast.
Yeah.
My favorite dish at his place was definitely that for sure. I mean, I think he had that on a pizza too. So that was pretty good.
That's pretty good. I just want you to know, I told Henry to come on and ask the question live, but Henry's really shy, as you know.
Oh yeah, very. It's probably killing him.
Henry you need to put in the chat what your favorite dish is from Shady Rest.
Definitely. And by the way, everybody, I would be answering in the chat, but for some reason it's not working for me tonight. So you just get my voice.
All right. So the last shank, I married 3 feathers together and just going to finish this off. These are a little bit bigger. I went up again to the next row. And the more you do this, the easier it is for you to kind of understand where you need to be with each section. All right. So got that nice platform. It's going to fold them, force them back.
It looks great.
Yeah, it's starting to come to life, and it's still today. This is my favorite one of my favorites just because of the blend of natural materials,
Mm-hmm.
and you can get
Mhm.
super artistic with this and shingle the tops to create, uh, different colors. Like if
Yeah.
you want like an olive over or a black over white or brown over white, I'll use feathers, what I call shingling, and tinning it, which is in the book. I've showed that. It's on the cover of the book where you can actually get a dark over light top to bottom without using markers. And you can just use all natural materials to do that, which I really, really like. I think it's kind of going back to the history of the sport, and and kind of grasping my inner Jason Taylor.
We should ask Jason what his favorite dish is at the Shady Rest. He's
Yeah,
the gourmand.
that's right.
So now you can see here, I
So
got,
beautiful, Blane. It just the
And
taper of it is incredible.
yeah,
And you're
it's
right. I love that it's all made from these natural materials. I mean,
yeah,
not obviously other than the brush, but it just has such a organic feel to it.
yeah.
yeah,
I,
and the way water flows over it, and I have such water uh, blocking or diversion type of fibers here. It's unreal how well these feathered changers swim. It really is. It was for a very long time I couldn't get a fly with any other material to swim like this until some of the synthetic materials I've been working with lately, and that's really opened up the door to do a lot of cool stuff. Just learning from naturals, and Bobby was a huge inspiration to that just by him saying, "Well, you ever thought about feathers? What feathers
Mhm.
work?"
yeah.
You know. All right,
Do you
now
think
we're on.
these swim better than the your classic game changer with that's with synthetics?
Yes, they. I mean, some of the newer finesse ones that I'm doing about the same, but I think the average person that doesn't do a lot of this and experimenting, this would be the one that they're going to see that swims unbelievable.
Hmm.
Uh,
Right. So you've gone up a hook size from the first one. What is this?
yeah, this is a 2/0 Arex minnow hook.
It's a
Okay.
280.
Yeah.
Yep, and I attach this the same way. And again, if you're gonna fish for big species that's gonna pull hard, and you might hook them on the back hook, you could take material and attach it through this and bring it through the eye and fold it down to make sure it's locked in tighter. Again, I put some UV resin or glue to lock this down, but for this, I'm just going to keep it quick and get it on here. So again, I'm going to attach this the same way I did the back, and you could finish this off really pretty and put jungle cock eyes on it and all that stuff, or you could just leave it blind, which which with these a lot of times I don't put eyes on them because the movement's so good that
Yeah.
I don't think you necessarily need it all the time.
Yeah.
All right, so I've got that tied down nice and tight. Add the feather back section, push it down, tie it down. Make sure it's nice and clean. All right, so now this section, I'm going to want this section to have full coverage. All right, so we're gonna go to a 2-inch brush and go away from the 1 inch. I mean 1.5. We're gonna go to a 2 now, and this might be a little long for right now, but it's okay. I'll do a little trim work on it. So you can take your material clip and get that out of the way. And you want this part to be the most dense part of the fly because this is where the water's hitting it first and creates all the chain reaction behind it. All right, so kind of like think of like a bulkhead, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you want to create more head shape up here and support. So I'm going to tie these really tight and super close together. I'll put a little.
Blane, Blane, why over the years while you've been doing this, have you ever tried wetting the material to help you with the tying, or you do it dry all the time?
I do it dry because you can't, when it's wet, you can't really, I don't feel like you can see the taper as well
Right.
and get your sizing correct. All right. So again, I'm going to do support, veil, and I'll finish the head off with a brush. So again, I'll fold this stuff back, clean that up. And you'll see that if I hold that up, it's a little bit more than full coverage. So I'm going to trim a little bit of the top off, a little bit of the bottom off. Nothing crazy here. Just cleaning it up. But I want this to be the tallest part of the fly because that's going to be the shoulders of the bait. And now I'm going to use the longest feathers up through here, up at the top part of the fly. We use 3 at a time. Get rid of that oily bottom section again. Do it for each one. And then marry them together again. Huh. There it is.
Runaway feathers.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Boy, there's a sudden plethora of questions here.
Yeah.
First one from Henry. As he said, serious question. If you ever want the fly to wake on the surface, where do the foam discs go, and do they replace any materials?
Yeah. So if I wanted to do a waker or a fly that's going to stay on the surface for years, I designed that disc slider and disc poppers back in the late 90s with Umpqua. That was actually my first commercially tied fly. And, I could send you some pictures of that where I was putting foam discs inside. So inside here, where you wouldn't see the discs, and put them on all through the fly. And me and my buddy Corey 10, 15 years ago were using those for stripers on a local river where traditionally we always used clousers and half and halves and whatnot, but this particular river had a lot of wood in it, right? So the wood would mean you lost 10 or 15 flies a day because you had to get down in there where the wood was, where the fish were, especially on a bright day, they wouldn't come up, or we just couldn't get them any other way. So we had to get deeper with sink tips, right? So one of the problems with that is losing a bunch of flies and guiding. For me, I was like, I don't want to, after guiding 10, 12 hours, the last thing I wanted to do was get home and tie another dozen flies that I lost that day.
Yeah.
So I started thinking about it. And so what they were on is that drop, right? That drop and rise, kind of a action. But, when we throw conventional, we could put a jig on the head of a fluke and you can get that crazy action with the drop and rise, and we'd catch a bunch. So I just said, well, I'm just going to use my game changer concept. And my buddies were like, you're crazy. You're going to waste your flies in that log jam, all those logs. But it's like I'm going to add buoyancy, and I'm going to use a short sink tip with a floating running line where I could stack mend the floating line and let the sink tip be in those eddies. And I just let that sink tip bring that fly down, much like a Dahlberg diver, right? And then rise. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting that same action, but I'm getting more of a vertical rise versus a vertical drop. So the strip's pulling the fly down, but the buoyancy of the fly is rising instead of going into the wood. So didn't lose any flies. And we went from not seeing eats because the water was kind of that red clay Instead of not seeing the eats, we were seeing all the eats. So it was the best of both worlds. We were catching fish, seeing the bites, all that kind of stuff. And then you get one of the things maybe that what I think maybe what Henry was maybe referring to is sometimes you get those night bites on lakes where fish are on points and you have to, those bombers or whatever where they have that V wake on the surface. Where floating line with that 2-hand slow strip where you're creating that wake. Did that for trout for many years. It's a great nighttime type of bite. And then I'm putting foam throughout the whole fly and waking it on the surface with a slow 2-hand retrieve. And I'll put discs up at the head instead of using a brush. And that's in the book as well. I don't know if
Fascinating.
you haven't seen
Yeah.
it. So
What leaders are using that if you're throwing a 9 weight?
um, depends on the line. I mean, sinking lines, I don't really use a leader. I've just used a straight. I may use a little bit of butt to the tippet size, but I've never been tippet shy. I've always used a lot heavier leaders. I very rarely go below 20 on bigger fish. Just because I feel like if you have the right fly, you could sell them on the fly versus going to lighter tippet, and I don't want to play with losing fish. So, I mean, standard for me, and a lot of people might hate that, but we're here in the Chesapeake. We have some of the biggest redfish on the planet, cobia, all that kind of stuff, and a lot of times we're using straight 50 or
Wow.
60 pound,
Wow.
and it's not a problem. And as long as you're using 60, I mean, over 60 core on your fly line, you can just get them in much faster. And I mean, I've stopped
Yeah.
55, 60-pound redfish without even getting them a backing. So for me, it's all about, not wearing them out and getting them done and, not playing them out too much.
That
So,
makes sense.
Yeah, good point.
Makes sense.
yeah. So what I'm going to do now is this is something I like. I feel like, going from the trout background, I put pec fins on these. So I'm going to use skinnier feathers here, right? And I'm going to marry them together and just pick off that fuzzy fiber. And I'll show you how I'm going to do this. So I'll put it on this side so you can see it. So I want these pec fins to come out just a little bit further than the body.
Mm-hmm.
Hold it in place and tie it down on the side of the shank, and then wrap back to where it meets the body of the feathers. So that's going to set right where a pec fin would be. So my idea is if a fish is looking at it from underneath, if I could sell them on that perfect silhouette, why not add it? It takes a second longer. It doesn't add anything to the swimming action, but it really, I was swimming these things, testing them in swimming pools, and it was very obvious that looking at the shadow on the bottom of the pool, that those pec fins, I mean, it looked just like the silhouette of a fish.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I just added them. I think it looks cool. See
Yeah.
that?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
that looks great.
So I'm going to move forward a little ways. So I move forward about 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to use this 2-inch brush again, and I'm not going to have to fight it and worry about cutting it here. And what I mean by that is by coming forward, I'm changing that taper a little bit by it's not going to be quite as tall because
Mhm.
it's not butted up against the previous section.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of creating taper without having to cut anything.
Mhm.
So I'll make about 3 to 4.5 wraps, something like that, depending on how it reacts here. And when you, like I said, I've got tons of pictures of different color variations, and you can really paint a fly with using a light first part of the feather and then stacking maybe a grizzly and then an olive over the grizzly, and it gives it a really beautiful, realistic looking fly at the finish here.
Yeah. Beautiful.
All right, so now I'm going to fold that back, tie that down, and see how get these tapers right. All right, so got a couple unruly hairs. But see how that taper matches kind of the previous one
Mm-hmm.
I just did. So
Yep.
I'm not worried about anything. And now I'm going to take again the three more of the giant feathers at the top. And this fly, you could actually finish this fly right here if you wanted to with just feathers. I've always liked putting a brush head on the final part, but you don't always have to do that. You could just finish it with feathers and put kind of Jason Taylor style, make it, or a Semper style with Bobby, and put some jungle cock at the finish. See how this looks. If I have enough room, I might add a brush. If not, I might just finish it like it is.
Well, it looks great.
Yeah, I was just really proud of this one. Bobby gave me the idea to use feathers, but two, it's just taking it at the time and a unique platform and bringing the tradition of fly tying into it, and the fact that it swam better than anything else was super cool too, because the natural materials is what caused that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just going to finish this off with a feather head. It's going to look more Semper style here. And if you're tying bigger versions of this, like a 6, 7, 8-inch fly, you're going to run out of the width that you need for this fly. So I highly recommend going to get super wide schlopping. Schlopping works perfect. It's the same exact type of feather that I'm using for this platform.
And
Mm-hmm.
it'll wind just as well without the stem breaking.
But yes, it does.
Ben Wally's on.
Wally,
Yeah.
nice.
He says, Senor Chocolate, what color do you have most confidence in?
White or soft pink.
Oh, soft pink, yeah.
And there she is.
Beautiful. God, look at that.
Oh,
So let me lay it out so you can see the profile that I created here. See the perfect fish shape now?
Beautiful. Yeah.
that's great.
I love
Lou,
the
you
taper
want to
on that.
jump back on?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
What's that?
Yeah, we're gonna
We're
jump back on the
joining you.
screen here.
That
Hi.
was
That's
that was such an incredible display of fly tying.
totally mesmerizing.
I
And
mean, each
Todd
piece.
asked a question, but
Yep.
and I'm gonna assume the answer is no. He was asking if, so you've been so careful about picking the right taper along, the whole length of the material there, the cape there to get that right taper. So someone was asking if you can kind of like the brush, if you can trim the feathers to get the right taper. I'm assuming you really don't want to do that with the natural material, right?
You can do it, but it just doesn't look good. I
Yeah.
mean, the natural taper of the feathers getting sharp at the ends really helps the whole look of the fly. I'm not saying you can't do it. It's just not going to look pretty, right? So it's much better to kind of learn the tapers and go about it that way than cutting them to fit the like I don't mind cutting one if it's one hackle that's too long. I'll get rid of that,
Right.
but for me, it's all about choosing the right feathers and the right angles and using your thread wraps to push them down or let them stand up. It's very similar to like a hollow.
Mm-hmm.
That was
Makes
great.
sense.
I mean,
Unbelievable.
Blane, that was
Really
so
cool.
great. Before we let you go, there's a couple things we need to mention out there. One, everyone, thank you so much for writing letters to both North Carolina and Massachusetts. Lou, you might want to talk more about that, but we had
Yeah.
a really great, let's call it a victory for protecting bonito and false albacore, which is very near and dear to all of us. I mean, boy, it was so important. And Lou, I'm sure the Got One app had something to do with some of the research that went towards these outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, and Blane obviously is very involved with the American Saltwater Guides Association,
Yeah,
but as is, Ben and others who are on tonight. But wow, what a historic victory for us. It's the first time ever that false albacore and bonito are being managed by a state. And actually two states, North Carolina and Massachusetts. We see this as a trend, up and down the coast. Huge thanks to Saltwater Guides Association for all the research they've done on
absolutely.
false albacore to show that there are one stock of fish that migrate up and down the coastline. And yeah, thanks to everyone who's using the Got One app. We are contributing all of that false albacore data and bonito data from your logs to NOAA, to ASGA, New England Aquarium, which has been doing a lot of the great research. So
Yeah.
awesome stuff.
Yeah, Lou, I mean, that app is so incredible.
It
And also,
is.
Thanks, man.
I I
Thanks,
mean,
guys.
as you know, I've been using it since the day it was created, and
Yeah.
I rely on it heavily. And I know Blane, you've been using it, and it's terrific. And before we forget, I want to thank Eric and Clay for all the help they've done this season for us. Thank you guys very much. You're part of our crew, and we couldn't do it without you guys. And Lou,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah, David, another great season, and I think and thanks to everyone who's on. I mean, what it's been amazing. We had about 100 participants on tonight,
Yeah,
Blaine. That's a real tribute to and a testament to your innovation and just your celebrity status as a tire. And
absolutely.
and I think I think David, it would be great to end the season the way we have our other episodes, which is to ask Blaine just for your closing comment on
Yeah,
what Bob Popovics meant to you and what you think he means to this whole sport of fly fishing and to fly
yeah,
tying.
Now it's kind of like Lefty. There'll never be another Bob. I mean,
right.
he's the greatest, and he embodied what fly fishing is all about. Why we love it. I mean, shared his knowledge. Uh, Great friend, great mentor, just unbelievable mind, and he was willing to share it with anybody. Right, anybody. I've watched him. He talked to everybody the same, just like Lefty did. And I think that came from the school of Lefty. But Bob was just a kind soul, right? So um, sometimes they tell you don't want to meet your heroes, but that's not the case with him.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
that's
Love
awesome.
it.
And one more group of people we really do need to thank. All this wouldn't be possible without all you guys tuning in. So again, we want to thank all the people who watch us. We can't thank you enough for coming back episode after episode. It's really means a lot to me and Lou and all of our guests.
Yeah. Thank you all. Happy
Good night.
2025. Let's get out there and start fishing.
Let's
Thanks,
We're it's
everybody.
tight
time.
lines.
It's good.
Thank
Tight
you
lines,
all.
everybody. Thanks, Blaine. Thanks,
Thanks,
David.
Blake.